So, first and foremost, I just want to definitely say thank you to everyone for tuning in. This is definitely a show about solutions, and it's a show about getting out of the cycle. It's about being very innovative, being the Lord of your life, the master of your own innerverse and universe, and beginning to look at this experience is not as a victim, but as someone who actually has the potential and the ability to do anything when given the proper formula and actually having the will and belief that one can do so. So this is what this is about empowering you and allowing you to step forth as your own supreme being, your own God and your own creator, and to begin to actually do that, create. And then in that understanding exactly what it takes and how it is a consistent thing, meaning it's balance is not something you just do one time and then all of a sudden it's over. It's something that you do on a consistent basis in order to keep your balanced creations coming through. So the first thing that I want to talk about today is we're going out of 2015 according to the Gregorian calendar, and we're about to head into 2016. And I think that's quite amazing. The year just, sped by. I feel like time is speeding up in general. And we talked about that as things get faster, the computers get faster, and everyone demands more rapid, faster things, then that's also a collective projection that goes into the reality that we all start to experience time even faster. So here we are at another year. But I can definitely say when recalling and recounting this year, it's been quite a few different things going on that's synchronistic. And I noticed that first with the dates. Many of the dates, such as the Gregorian calendar holidays, actually fell on very significant astrological holidays, or astrological occurrences, such as eclipses, full moons, etc. So if you go back into the calendar, you actually notice that Easter and many of these Gregorian calendar holidays actually came right on point with many of the astrological occurrences in the reality. And to me, that's what really dictated what kind of year that we were in. That I felt like, if there ever could be a lineup, then it would be this year. And I just think that it's a Gregorian calendar lineup, meaning that the Gregorian calendar it lined itself up to astronomical occurrences this year. And we'll see what happens next year, if it'll remain the same or if it'll come off a little bit. But I think there was a lot of talk, especially in the beginning of the year. I can't say it was a lot of talk. Many people knew that 2016 was supposedly the year of the light, which is, of course, the time dictation of the beginning of the Masonic calendar. So I think that what's actually happening here when we look at the the astronomical observances is that we find that this is a very deep synchronistic period that we're going through. And then sure enough, if you look a little bit closer, you'll start noticing that there's a lot of change in every way going on in the world. The world is actually going quantum. And sometimes we look at those changes as just being, did we get free, or did we, overthrow the government, or, did we, get some total world awakening where everyone glides into the sky? But it's actually the nucleus or the as below resonators that we need to look at to begin to determine what exactly is happening, because there could be, and there is a massive movement going on, but that doesn't mean that everyone's involved in it and everyone's experiencing it and benefiting from it. So always make that personal note that just make sure that you're not spending your time, and this is your own choice, but spending your time still rehashing the past and what went on, or things that actually don't really have any real relative significance to your spiritual progress, while there is some massive awakening going on and some experiences that could be had by yourself. I mean, there's the big realization of even the shamanistic practices, ayahuasca, DMT, all these different things have really come into the forefront for the last 4 or 5, let's say 10 years. Obviously, there was a whole complete segment of that back in the 60s, but it was, of course, mixed with a lot of the programming that we're now uncovering with the music and all those kind of things. So what I'm saying is look very closely at 2016 and notice the major shifts that have gone on in the world. And don't get distracted by what's going on TV or what's going on with the latest conspiracy theorist that's doing the externalization of what's really going on in our innerverse, because whatever we choose to benefit from, that is our choice. So the second thing, I don't want to keep saying first and second thing, but I try to order it in some kind of way. But this is also another one of those astronomical occurrences is actually that this Christmas that everyone will be celebrating, or I guess all the people who celebrate Christmas, I definitely won't be celebrating in the way in which others will be celebrating. So we'll talk about that today. But it also rolls on a full moon. And obviously that's the winter solstice. And during that time, the sun is at its lowest point according to how the earth is positioned. And during that time, you actually can take yourself through the good old death, burial, and resurrection process of your own consciousness. This means having the opportunity to actually turn over a brand new leaf. And this is why you find things such as the New Year's resolution becoming a major part of that period of time, because it is still remnants of that. This process is actually supposed to be about not going into this next year or this next circle or cycle or anu into that same old frequency, but actually breaking those old wineskins, as it said, by actually coming up with something new. And so that's the big challenge, is how do you create something new in this matrix? Because oftentimes we feel like, everything's already been done, and, we're in some kind of a consistent program that will always remain the same. And that's just not true. So one of the things that I want to talk about right off is about breaking those shells. And if you remember a while back, I talked about how in the Kabbalah, it actually mentions how the shells are actually the frequencies that build up around even the planetary systems, that are in every aspect, all of the actions and activities that go on in a cycle become solidified. And this is called the shells, or that term is interpreted as the excrement. So it actually means what is the byproduct of things. And so that's the first thing that we need to pay attention to, is that the shells that can often build up around the body, the aura, the planet, etc., can be likened unto excrement, meaning that actual feces of things that have occurred, the byproduct. So if we remain in that shell without transforming ourselves, like you see many different animals and species of this creation have a process where they either shed, in every sense, that's generally what they do. They shed their skin, they shed their fur, and they get on a new coat. So it's important for us to start taking the pointers of doing things like that and begin to shed off the old shell of the previous, not only just year, but the previous consciousness. And so we're going to talk about today about exactly how to do that, how to have that frequency shift. So the frequency shift is very important because it's actually the only thing that I found that actually allows the person to be consistent about their new level of progress in their awakening. And I find that words sometimes become rather irrelevant to a person who is looking to make a great change if they don't have that frequency shift. And it's because you can tell them the greatest knowledge that you've ever come across, period. And if they are not ready for that frequency shift, and they're not ready to do it themselves and to go forth and do the things that are necessary to cause a different vibration to come over their total consciousness, then they remain in that same shell, that same overlay. So frequency shifts generally accompany massive spiritual experiences, sometimes even trauma, anything that actually shifts the frequency of the person for long enough for them to say, whoa, I can see where I was, and I'm definitely not there now, and I'm able to get a bird's eye view. Since you're now out of that shell, you're out of that overlay, you're able to get an entirely different view of what was going on with you during that process. And this allows you to have that opportunity to go into great change. So we find that these frequency shifts are often caused when a person raises their frequency using any kind of chakra opening techniques, such as breathing. Some people use the plants of nature, and some, again, have had these experiences all of a sudden, paranormal even sometimes, that have taken their frequency to an entirely different level, and they find themselves not being able to go back into that old shell or go into that old overlay. Like every time they go back into that old place and those old people and they're still talking that same thing, it feels uncomfortable. It feels like something the person doesn't want to be a part of anymore. And that's because the frequency shift is beginning to take place. So it's a great visualization to understand what needs to happen, especially if you're talking to someone and then you feel like you're just not breaking through. And that breaking in the breaking through is actually to crack that shell, even intense the calcification that goes on around many of the glands to break that shell, which is something like the outer area of an egg, in order to allow that person to birth themselves. So techniques for breaking the shells are, as we mentioned, and also bringing the vibration of the body up. You could do that through changing your diet. I mean, there's a multitude of ways to actually do it, but it must be done. And again, information and knowledge is not the greatest way to do that. It ranks very low on the list. And this is because when we're looking through this shell, it's almost like we're looking through a film or a layer over our own eyes. That's hence the term the overlay. And everything that we see through those eyes then become interpreted based on our own shell and our own overlay. So if you have a bad attitude, then what you see, you tend to interpret with that same attitude or that same way. And so this is a good example of how these shells and overlays affect how we see things. So